I'm Shereen Bhan, and today we're joined by the global CEO of Adobe here at their headquarters in India. Joining me today is Shantanu Narayen. Shantanu, thanks so much for joining us, and it's great to have you back here on CNBC-TV18 and in person.
It's always a pleasure to be on your show, Shereen. Thanks for having me.
Shantanu, let me start by asking you about your view of the world. It is an increasingly uncertain time, not just because of the geopolitical tensions that we're seeing, but inflation, the central bank action, and several pressure points that CEOs have their eye on. As you look at the world today, what are you most concerned about? What are you most confident about?
Well, I think first in my role, if I'm not optimistic, I'm in the wrong role. So overall, I just continue to be optimistic about what's happening. I think the world has gone through these phases. The first unprecedented phase of what happened with the pandemic was certainly, where people said, let's make sure we focus on health and safety of people. I think the war in Ukraine has certainly, been another one of these geopolitical shocks. But I think as it relates to Adobe, the irony is, whether you're not able to be somewhere in person, digital has become a more important part of everybody's strategy. So, I think in the long run, the consumer sentiment still seems to be fairly positive. And businesses, I think, are thinking about how they use digital to navigate whatever uncertain times they might have.
Speaking about the uncertain times that we live in, but the acceleration of digital, and this is an interesting number that I picked up from your earnings call for the last quarter, where you talk about the fact that consumers have spent $1 billion more online in May of this year compared to April, and year-to-date shoppers have spent over $377 billion online. That's a 9% growth year-on-year. So you believe that despite the uncertainties, despite the inflationary pressures, this is likely to continue, this trend line?
There's no question. The genie is not going back in the bottle in terms of how people engage with customers. And what you're referring to, Shereen, is the third business that we have, which is the digital experience business or the Experience Cloud. And we have this unprecedented view of what people are doing digitally because our business strategy there is enabling businesses to power their businesses digitally. And so the Adobe Digital Index report is an ability for us to aggregate what's happening. And, I think people were always looking at, is the growth accelerating?
Yeah.
But the reality is that more and more of this stuff is happening online. What they were buying changed. And, we have really good insight into what's happening with inflation. And certainly, I think people moved a little bit more towards groceries as well as more, things that they needed for their running of their houses. But I think the trend towards online is just, it's explosive and it's not going to change.
When you talk to CEOs today, Shantanu, what are they telling you? Yes, we continue to be believers in the digital story, but is there some degree of tentativeness that is creeping into conversations at this point in time in the boardroom, given the vagaries that CEOs have to deal with?
I think most CEOs around the world are dealing with three issues. I think the first issue that they're all dealing with, and you touched on this, Shereen, was what's happening macroeconomic, what's going to happen with inflation, what's going to happen as it relates to the war situation. So that's on people's mind. I think the second situation that everybody's also talking about is the whole hybrid work versus the back to work and, the war for talent and how are you making sure that you recruit, retain the best talent. So I think that's on everybody's mind. And then the third part is really more, I think, particular to their business, which is given these two macroeconomic trends, what represents a headwind and what represents a tailwind as it relates to their business. And are they disrupting themselves? Are they being disrupted? And are they innovating? But the theme that I hear over and over and over again is if you can't control the macroeconomic situation, are you running the company for the long run? And are you making the important decisions that you need to make right now to position yourself for when whatever happens with the macroeconomic climate becomes more of a tailwind than a headwind? And that's, I think, the conversation that I love to have, because you can't control the short run, but you can control the trajectory of the business in the long run.
I'll come to the levers that you're trying to control as far as your business is concerned in just a second. But since we're here at your headquarters in India, let me talk to you about the India story, the kind of tailwinds that you see for your business particularly and for India in general.
Well, first, let's start with the fact that we celebrate 25 years of Adobe India. I know the country is celebrating 75 years, but we're celebrating 25 years, and it's this unbelievable milestone. I know you remember when Naresh started this, and we had 3 people. And to think about the fact that we have 7,000 people, which is, a quarter of our population worldwide, employee base, innovating in every aspect of our business, it just, is been beyond my wildest expectations in terms of how successful the India R&D Center, the India Consulting Services, and now the India market opportunity has been for India. I think as it relates to the India market opportunity, both digital as well as electronic payments, there's some of these, secular trends that are actually more accelerated in India than anywhere else in the world. The cost of transaction is plummeting in terms of financial services. The mobile, revolution has exploded beyond anybody's means. And I think everything happening electronically and digitally with everything that's happening on payments is just a unique opportunity in India. And I think what's really substantially different even now than 3 or 5 years ago is that everybody's aspirations are not just about capturing the Indian market for Indian companies, it's capturing the global market. And so from that point of view, the interest in all of our solutions is actually exploding. I just spoke to a couple of CEOs on my trip, and they're so bullish about India because the demographics as well as the population is only going to be a positive.
I remember you said that you're disproportionately invested in India, and of course you've always been a long-time believer in the India story, but given the confidence that you see in the domestic market as well as the R&D base that you've been able to set up here in India, what is it going to mean both in terms of hiring, in terms of future investments? From a build, buy or partner point of view, where does India stack up?
Well, first from the build, we're a growth-oriented company. We've been achieving record revenues every year. And when we talk to the street about, the fact that we have $100 billion plus addressable market opportunity, growth is happening in terms of our employee base. We're one of the few companies that is still, growing quite extensively. And that growth is disproportionately happening in India. We're a smaller company in terms of just the number of employees, but that doesn't change the skill set or the importance of talent in India. And India will just continue to be a huge place. We just finished a new building in Bangalore. We're building in Noida. So I think that just reflects our excitement on the employee and the skill and talent base here in India. I think as it relates to the business opportunity, that is a little bit more nascent. And you have to look at it by all 3 businesses that we're in. One of the areas I'm most excited about, honestly, is what we call our creative business. And we're trying to unleash creativity for all. And when you think about what's happening in terms of the amount of content that's being created in India, the importance of education, the importance of digital literacy and creative content, that's an area where the explosion of the number of people, we have this product called Adobe Express. I want 1 billion people in India using that product to communicate the idea that they have, because everybody has a story to tell. So I think you have to look at each of your businesses. You have to recognize where you are on the S-curve. Some of them are perhaps smaller than our global businesses, but the trajectory in the second derivative is what excites me.
And I want to link what you're seeing happen in India as far as the creative or the creator economy is concerned to the trends that you're picking up globally as well. I mean, this has seen explosive growth, especially in the last few years. But now with Web3 and the Metaverse, how do you see this panning out?
Well, 2 really exciting things on that. First is the creator economy. The reality is that what has happened on the web is anybody with a creative idea, and if you're a small and medium business, or if you're somebody who has something you want to merchandise, your ability to get a global population and to differentiate yourself through our creative tools, it's never been easier to do it. And so I think we're very excited about the creator economy. We're partnering with some companies on them ability to create NFTs so that, we have the ability to have electronic provenance of the goods that are being done.
Are you a believer in NFTs and crypto?
Well, I'm a believer
in the technology.
I'm a believer in the technology, and I'm a believer that just as physical art has a value, electronic art will have a value. Now, whether it's worth what tulips were worth in Netherlands in the early days, or whether it was worth something less, that will play itself out. But there's nothing inherent about electronic art not being valuable. And if for somebody who wants to buy it and somebody who wants to sell it, there is a transaction to be made. I think there was a little bit more hype associated with it, but it'll come back to, you know, a more normal situation. The metaverse, on the other hand, is actually very interesting. And it's interesting for the simple reason that the way I like to describe it is more and more things that you did in the physical world, you're going to do in the virtual world. Whether it's experiencing travel, whether it's experiencing medical care, whether it's, you know, transacting business, whether it's doing online commerce. Now that's being labeled the metaverse. And so the content creation and the interactivity that you have to do on the metaverse is an order of magnitude more difficult, because you now have to not only create the ability to have this immersive experience, but you have to have the ability to interact with, as they say abroad, the avatars or whatever. And so Adobe has this unique role to play where we're telling all of these brands, this is how you start to dip your toe in the water. This is how you create a brand. And what's happening, unfortunately, right now in the metaverse is you have multiple worlds. And so, you know, these brands have to decide which world am I betting on. But I think the whole content creation process is something that we can help them with. We have a white paper, and you are seeing more and more companies, whether it's with Meta and creating it for them, or Roblox or other gaming environment, you have to start to experience that, because that's where the next generation is. If social media is where the previous generation was starting to engage in terms of being on the internet, the metaverse will be, you know, one of the places where you're going to be able to attract new customers.
What is the playbook then for the metaverse? You said you've got a white paper out. You're working with companies like Meta, collaborating and partnering with them. What have been the learnings so far? I mean, this is just about starting to sort of take off. What are the learnings so far?
I think the first learning is you have to create a presence. Much like you created a presence in social media, you have to create a presence, and you have to represent what your brand is in the authentic way that's available on the metaverse. And I think that's table stakes. The second part of it is, what part of commerce do you want to create on the metaverse? And is that commerce experience more immersive, more exciting than what it would be either in a two-dimensional internet world or in a physical world? And so I think for some of the companies, their ability to show objects in 3 dimensions, their ability to show color with more fidelity, their ability for you to engage with somebody to show you how that actually works, a 3-dimensional world really enables you to do more of that. And so I think people just being thoughtful about how you start engaging with customers, and then how do you want to attract, and which segment of customers do you want to attract? Because there's a very different segment of customers. So I think even the discipline in a company of saying who is going to be watching Shereen on the metaverse, and how do I think about them, and what's the right content for them, I think that exercise is where the real value is.
I have to start by having a presence in the metaverse. I don't even have an avatar, so I need to get started on that. But you know what I want
We can certainly help you with that.
Thank you very much. Much needed. But what I want to ask you about, and you know, you brought up the issue of the war of talent, and that being a priority that CEOs are focusing on. You know, through the course of the pandemic, people said, okay, you know, work from office is over, work from home is going to be the new normal. Now everyone's talking about flexi work and hybrid workforce. You're now, you know, from the great resignation, you're coming back to now a situation where people are boomeranging, coming back to jobs that they had just quit. So how are you navigating this war for talent today?
I think we did a really outstanding job, firstly. And, you know, Gloria Chen, who is our CHRO, we were very clear up front where the first priority was employees' well-being and health. And the resiliency that they showed us by overnight working from home and making sure that we continue to innovate and serve our customers really fills you with a lot of pride. I also have a strong belief that, you know, in a company, you have to build culture. And you have to enable people to grow their career. People come to companies because they feel like they can have an impact and they can grow their career. And I still haven't figured out how you do that completely virtually. So we have a strong point of view, and our point of view is that we've always been a company that's flexible. Nobody has to come clock in at Adobe. But for meetings that matter, you know, I'm going to do an all-hands here. I did an all-hands in Bangalore yesterday. When you're incubating new projects and you want to have those, you know, creative sessions, it's only best done in person. And so I think, and frankly, the fatigue that people had when they worked exclusively at home, because they weren't able to have that distinction between
no
when they were
separation.
work. Exactly. No separation. And so we've said, we want people to come back, but we want people to come back for meetings that matter. We want people to come back so that they can truly appreciate the unique culture that Adobe is. And we want people to come back because we can help grow their careers. Because if I don't know somebody, it's unlikely that I'm going to think about them when I have this really interesting project that I want to work on. And for all those reasons, I think most employees want you to have a point of view, and then they can self-select whether it works for them or it doesn't work for them. And I think trying to appease everybody as opposed to having a strong point of view, I think the latter is a more successful way to build a culture.
We'll take a short break, but we return with Shantanu Narayen.